Quiet on the set. And action.
Welcome to Media and Monuments, presented by Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Media and Monuments features conversations with industry professionals speaking on a range of topics of interest to screen-based media makers.
My guest today has devoted much of her media career to raising the visibility of Asian and Pacific Islander Americans and the amazing contributions they have made to U.S. history. I'm your host, Sandra Abrams, and I'll be chatting with Samantha Cheng. She is an award-winning American writer, producer, documentarian, and seasoned journalist. I read on her resume that she worked for World News Tonight, and as we know, they don't hire just anybody. Samantha is based in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. She's also a WIFV member, and she is president and co-founder of Heritage Series, an independent production company which specializes in educational programs about ethnic minorities in the U.S. She was a principal owner of the multimedia company, Television Production Services, and now she's very involved with Gals and Gears, and we're going to ask her about that. Samantha has a long list of awards to her credit, such as a 2017 San Francisco Emmy Award for a public service campaign. And speaking of awards, this year, Samantha is selected by Women in Film and Video as a Woman of Vision. Welcome, Samantha, to the podcast, and congratulations on your honor of being named a Woman of Vision.
Thank you, Sandra. Happy to be here.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being here and chatting with me. You're a very busy woman, and you said you were on deadline the other day. So I wanted to know, what's this project you're working on? Can you share any information with us?
Well, I've just completed a documentary on the last noblewoman, or one of the last noblewomen of the Qing dynasty. Her name is Dora Fugh Lee, and she lives in the Metro DC area. She has a very incredible history. She lived through the most tumultuous time in China. She lived through the second Japanese invasion of China. She lived through their occupation of Beijing. She lived through World War II. Her father was under house arrest for most of her young life before she was able to get out of China in 1949. It's an amazing story, and it has been picked up by WETA PBS and WETA Metro. And it will be airing in May during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.
Well, how do you find your stories? Because one of the stories that you had was Norman Mineta, the boy from San Jose, and I watched it, and I learned new things about him. I didn't realize how involved he was in the Americans with Disabilities Act. So how do you find your subjects?
They often find me. So with the piece I did on Norm in 2000, I was approached by the Asian Pacific American Center within the Smithsonian Institution because, believe it or not, people thought Norm Mineta was Italian. And they were very, very fearful that Norm would be confused with being an Italian and wonder why the Asian American Center was worked out an opportunity to have his portrait hung in the National Portrait Gallery. So they approached me and asked me if I would develop a piece, a short biography on Norm. And I said, absolutely, I will do that. And that's how Norm came into my life. Shortly thereafter, I did a series of programs for the U.S. Capitol Historical Society featuring oral histories of Asian Pacific American members of Congress who served in the House. And we didn't have anyone in the Senate then. So I did a biography on Dalip Singh Sond, who was the first Asian, the first Indian, and the first Sikh, Sikh,
Right.
to be elected
Sikh. Right.
as a member of Congress in the state of California. People voted for him because they thought he was Mexican. They couldn't figure out, because he was a clean-shaven Sikh. He didn't wear a turban. He was very eloquent in speech, and he was an incredibly dynamic man. I've had the good fortune of doing biographies on people that you actually like, because oftentimes you're asked to do things and you find out, yeah, you don't really like that person or you don't like their politics, but you have to do the piece anyway, and you have to be objective, and it's hard to be objective. But I've been very, very fortunate with my commissions that every time I'm asked to do a piece on a specific person, it has turned out that the person is totally amazing. And I end up falling in love with them, falling in love with their story. And it truly comes out in the piece itself.
That sounds wonderful. And what you're working on right now sounds wonderful. I did notice, though, on your LinkedIn page that you went to school in New York City. You went to Baruch. You studied accounting. So all of a sudden, you're in the film business, though.
That was intentional.
How did you make that leap from, Baruch, which for people who are not New Yorkers is considered the school to go to for accounting? So you make that, you go from there to film. How did that happen for you?
I've had a very positive journey. I'm one of the luckiest women you will ever meet. I seem to find myself at the right place at the right time, meeting the right people. So I'm very, very blessed, and I'm very grateful for the career path that I've had. I went to Baruch because, believe it or not, I didn't know that you could go out of state to go to college. I also started Baruch as a senior in high school.
So why did you start? You just decided you wanted to go to school early?
Well, I wanted to go to school early. Circumstance at home encouraged me to do so. And it afforded me the opportunity to spread my wings a little. I went to Bayside High, which was an incredible school. I mean, I'm a product of the New York City public school system, and I'm very fortunate. And I was very fortunate to go to school when the city had money. So things are very, very different now. We had music, we had sports, we had speech therapy, because Chinese was my first language. So I didn't learn to speak English until I was in elementary school. And they sent me to speech class for about 4 or 5 years. And that's unheard of. You don't have those opportunities now. So I speak with no accent. And that has actually worked to my advantage, especially in this field, because you don't always see the person that you're talking to, but you hear them. So I've had many, many fortunate experiences from there. And making the leap from business school, it wasn't that much of a leap, okay? I did minor in writing.
Okay.
I minored in journalism. It wasn't a proper it wasn't a proper space of study, but there was English, and it was a prerequisite. So I, sort of finessed that with my professors, and they actually turned me on to cable television before cable TV was even a thing. At the very onset, the way cable came about, they had to cut a deal because they didn't want to be governed by the FCC, that they offered public service channels to the public in order not to be governed by the FCC, which is, we have C-SPAN because of that deal, and we have public service channels in cable because of that deal. And I worked on the longest running video magazine show in college and after college, called What's On Live. So we recorded out of the 23rd Street studio, which was right next door to HBO at the time. And I made some incredible contacts through that. And when I got out of school, I decided to, I went the corporate path and I worked for Revlon and Estee Lauder while at school. And I shared my thoughts of wanting to do other things with my immediate supervisor, my boss. And he said, you know what? I think we're going to introduce you to the people who do our commercials. So I was actually in commercial television work before I got into traditional broadcasting. So I worked for Tulchin Studios and Adrian Russo Productions. I met my husband during that time. So it was an incredible journey. I produced all the beauty commercials for Estee Lauder, Revlon, and my first national spot was a 10-second ID for Evan Picone pantyhose, which came out of ACNR advertising. And that campaign won a Clio. So, I mean, I've been very, 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 very lucky and fortunate in my mentors, in my experience. I mean, even before I finished Baruch, I moved to England and worked for the BBC as an international intern. So I'm really, truly one of the luckiest women you'll ever meet, because how I got that connection was I was a junior volunteer during UNICEF. So in junior high school is when UNICEF first organized in the early 70s. And I read something, I think it was in Time magazine, that they wanted volunteers for UNICEF. So I wrote them a letter and said, I would like to be a junior volunteer at the United Nations for UNICEF, and spent the summer doing that. From that opportunity, which is how I found out about the International Exchange Program with the British Universities North America Club, which partnered with the International Educational Exchange Program, which got me a work permit to work for the BBC. So, I mean, I truly am a very, very lucky woman, incredibly fortunate. So when I wanted to do something that was longer than 30 seconds, I was able to join ABC News. And I started as, a PA, I wasn't even a desk assistant. I was just a PA. I went and got coffee for everybody, and then I learned pull code, SMPTE time code, and then just took off from there. So again, when I worked with ABC News, I worked out of the Washington, D.C. bureau, but I was attached to...
So you were already in D.C. when that happened, because that was one of my questions. How did you get from New York
I came down to
DC?
Washington right after covering STS 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I did space launches, 8 space launches with ABC News, with a very special unit called Special Events. And the executive producer was a gentleman named Bob Siegenthaler. He's since passed. And my direct supervisor was a gentleman named...
And his son is John.
I think it was John Siegenthaler.
Right?
It was Bob Siegenthaler, because John Siegenthaler is a correspondent.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So John Siegenthaler was the executive producer for Special Events, which was not attached to news. It was not part of the entertainment team, but it did allow for special units to cover conventions, disasters. Yeah, I remember being in Florida on one of the STS space launches, and Brezhnev died. So all of a sudden, everyone had to move. So I remember standing maybe 10 feet from Frank Reynolds, and he was not a very tall man. So he and Jules Bergen were talking about who's going to stay at Kennedy Space Center, and who's going to Russia? And, Jules is like, I have to stay here, but, we're fighting against the cosmonauts here, so we have this sort of tussle. It was truly an amazing opportunity to be in the room.
Right. And that's what people talk about.
I was in
Were
the
you
room.
in the room? And you can say...
David Hartman was the anchor of Good Morning America. And David Hartman brought his children to the space launch. And as I'm pulling code, he's like, Samantha, can you just watch my kids for a little while? So I ended up babysitting, getting coffee, do McDonald's runs, and pulling time code. I did whatever was needed. And fortunately, I knew how to deal with equipment. So Florida is a free to work state, so you didn't have union issues. So I could actually fuss with the fax machine when there were fax machines and fuss with the photocopier. So I got to teach everyone how to use the photocopier, because we were moving away from, carbon paper scripts where you would have 7 colors that have to be distributed to all these necessary people. It was a thrilling time, and I was very, very fortunate.
You met some amazing people, and you were in the room, and there's not a lot of people who can say that they were there, but you can. So, and that's probably one of the reasons why we're calling you a woman of vision.
A woman of luck. Okay. I'm truly, truly very lucky. And I'm grateful for all of my experiences and all of my mentors. Because I have that personality. You either love me or you hate me. I don't know why you hate me, but I do instill some sort of dislike, immediate dislike, because I present differently. I'm Chinese American. I'm not ugly. Okay. And I speak well. So I somehow am imagined as either a threat or an ally. And you learn to negotiate that very early on.
And what did you have to negotiate? Tell for people who may not understand, what did you have to negotiate?
You have to sort of justify your existence for being there, because what do I have to do with the news? I'm a young Chinese American woman just trying to find her footing in a field that doesn't particularly like women in the first place. I was very, very blessed to learn from a mentor in New York that I should not learn how to make coffee. And to this day, I really make very bad coffee. And my husband has to make the coffee in the house because I stink at it. So it's been interesting. My mentor in New York, who, I worked for Tulchin Studios, AC&R, all these different independent production companies. And my mentor, Harris Stenzel in New York, had said to me, you have to be very, very cautious on who you interact with in this field, because you're very young. And, when I was in my 20s, I looked like I was 14. Okay. I was very young and very petite. So coming to Washington, that was a real problem in terms of people understanding who you are, what you're doing, and why you have this position, and why do you look like you're 12. Yeah. So.
Well, speaking of mentors, I wanted to ask you, was there anybody when you were moving through your different careers that you wanted to emulate, or that you looked up to, or someone that you said, oh, this person is, someone I see as a hero? And
I didn't
anything
have so
that you
much
can
of
share
that.
on that?
I did have very strong women guide me. So Harris Stenzel, who is the executive producer of Tulchin Studios in New York, was my mentor for 3 or 4 years. Then there was a lovely woman named Susan Littman, who guided me through a couple of years as well in commercial production. And what I learned from them, the takeaway was be present, take direction, don't be sensitive or try not to take it personally, and just keep your head down and do your work. And, you know, if you get an accolade, that's great, but don't expect one, which is why, you know, all of this is this fuss about being a woman of vision is very flattering. But, you know, I'm just sort of not used to that because I keep moving forward. You know, I don't have an opportunity. I do not afford myself the opportunity to rest on my laurels. I'm always working on the next project. So it's really interesting because of a colleague of mine or someone I met on the road while I was promoting a particular bill. Because I have a very varied background since I've been to Washington, and I learned that the atrocities of being an Asian American in the United States. I did not learn that in New York City public schools. So that has become very close to my heart. And since leaving the network in the, in the late 80s, early 90s, you're allowed to work on programs that you don't have to be censored or be cognizant of how it's going to impact. I don't editorialize my shows, so I still approach it as a journalist, where facts are facts. You present the facts, and you present as many facts as possible that cover the whole spectrum to give context, but you leave it to your audience to decide which way they want to think. Or my programs are created to generate thought. That's all they are. I just want someone to ask a question or just take a moment and think. And some programs come at you too much, too quickly, very heavy, very intense, that you have to watch the show like 5 times to understand it. And I'm learning more about stretching and giving the audience time. So you're constantly learning in this profession, not just technology-wise, but how to present a story in an unbiased fashion. And that has always been my rule of thumb. You do not editorialize in your programs, which is why I stay in nonfiction. You know, it keeps me safe.
Well, you are in the nonfiction world, but you do want to promote Asian American. I wanted to ask you on the commercial side, we've seen a huge success in the past few years of Crazy Rich Asian, then Everything Everywhere All at Once, Michelle Yeoh winning Best Actress Oscar. What do you think on the commercial side and all the success that we have seen with Asians?
It's about time.
In the past. Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time coming. It really has. I mean, I love the fact that people are now, recognizing Anna May Wong for her contributions.
Right, from the 30s. And she even ran like her own studio.
Yeah, she did all these
pictures.
She was quite impressive.
Very. Mm-hmm.
And, a program that I also do is called APA Legacy, where we feature, where we create public service campaigns about the contributions of Asian Americans to U.S. history. And, just doing those small vignettes, they're 60s and 90s, but mostly 90s, because it's hard to tell a story in 60 without getting that commercial edge to it. I've been very, very fortunate that I can develop these types of programs and put them out there. Those programs are often partnerships, and I've been very blessed with my partnerships, extending myself and using my skill set for good versus using my skill set in a manipulative political environment. So I don't particularly care for the world of fiction, but I see the need for it because that's the opportunity for people to see someone who looks like themselves. And that's terrific. So to answer your question, it's about time. It's just about time. And sadly, this time is tied to AAPI hate. They go hand in hand. because one is to counter the other. If you look at it chronologically, you'll recognize that, whoa, there's some similarities here there in terms of timing. So we're getting negative press from one person who says, kung flu and, all Asian women are prostitutes and, going back to the 1800s, all Asian women are prostitutes. We couldn't even come into the country. Mind you, even if you were born here, you couldn't get out of that servitude level. So it's about time. And I'm glad and I'm happy that people are recognizing the contributions of Asian Americans. I feel that the programs that I develop that are educational, I do so because I don't have children, but I want my friends' children. I want my families who have children to learn that they are not alone and that there was always someone before them. Now, granted, it didn't all start until like 1800s, several generations ago. I mean, I don't, this is not part of Women in Film and Video, but I worked on a bill to honor and recognize Chinese Americans who served in World War II. And that has taken off all on its own. And that comes from a documentary that I developed and wrote on the Chinese Americans in the Mississippi Delta, where people were like, you had Chinese people in Mississippi? And I'm like, yeah, there was like 500 families and they've been there since the late 1800s. So it was a really interesting program. And when I learned of the fact that Chinese Americans were never honored, mind you, recognized for their service. In fact, I learned some really nasty parts of our history saying Chinese people who can serve, but in the Navy, they can only be a steward or work in the kitchen. It wasn't until we were 2 years into World War II that that law changed and that they could become a purser or a petty officer. Commissioned officers in World War II that were Chinese American, I think I can name 5. Okay, that's shocking considering that my research has identified over 22,000 Chinese Americans who served. And that's curious too, because there were only 100,000 Chinese Americans between mainland US, Hawaii, and Alaska, but on the mainland, there were only 78,000. So that's over 20%. It's very curious. My work has been very fulfilling and rewarding. I come from a family of 4 service members of World War II. My father, my grandfather on my mother's side, my grandfather on my father's side, and my great uncle on my mother's side. They were all World War II veterans, serving either in the Navy, the Army, or the Merchant Marines. And I didn't really click to that until the bill was passed in Congress. So myself and a group of other people got together. We took other bills for that were focused on ethnic minorities who served in World War II. We threw them in the blender. We mixed it up. We did not reinvent the wheel. We ripped off the language. We wrote a fabulous bill. It passed Legislative Council like in the first shot. And then it was introduced less than 3 months after we wrote it. It was introduced in both the House and the Senate. And we were able to turn that bill around in less than 18 months. And to have that honor bestowed on these Chinese Americans who were so fearful to talk about their service because they were promised citizenship and almost all of them got it, but they were also remembering that this country did not want them here in the first place. So many of them came as paper sons. which we are the only ethnic group that has that unique qualification as our designation as a paper son. There's so much in American history that we must learn from our mistakes. One of my last big documentary is about Asian Americans and the law, and how Asian Americans changed the face of how jurisprudence is practiced here in the U.S. So that truly is my last documentary, because I've already put in 4 years of my time in pre-production and research, and it will take another 4 to maybe 8 years to produce it.
Or a labor of love. Well, in reference to the military documentary, that the name of that is Honor and Duty, the Mississippi Delta Chinese, and that was from 2016.
Correct.
Is the title. So
and
if
that's
anybody
actually
is interested
in so many
that.
schools now. I mean, many universities have bought the rights to that. There's an educator's guide. There's a book that I wrote, which is huge. It's a compendium, and it's like 1,000 pages.
That's wonderful.
I'm very, very blessed.
Well, speaking of blessed, I want to ask you about Gals and Gears. We haven't talked about Gals and Gears, and I wanted to hear about your involvement in that, because that is very near and dear to Women in Film and Video's heart. So tell us about that.
So Amy DeLuise, this is the brainchild of, Amy and I have known each other for over 30 years. She and I worked on a show together. And Amy had just graduated from college, and was getting her feet wet in the industry. I had left the network, and I was picking up some freelance work, and we met on set. And we've had a burgeoning friendship since. So at a WIFV event, she said to me, Samantha, I've been going to NAB, and I'm standing in the bathroom, and there's no one in the bathroom. In the women's room. How weird is that? I said, girlfriend, I've been coming to NAB for blah, blah, blah years. And yes, I'm glad someone else has finally noticed it, because when I go to NAB, it's always for work. And Amy was for work with her, but she's much more in tune to things than I am. And I said, whatever I could do to help you, please let me know. And she has invited me back every year since, I want to say, my first Gals and Gear was, let me just look it up. I think it was like 2017.
And for people who don't know, what is it?
Okay, so Gals and Gear is a very unique program. The intention of the program is to support women in technology and give them a platform and a voice at a male-dominated field. I have been in this field from forever, and because I can read and write and understand technology and then convey that message through either technical writing or marketing writing, I've been an active participant in NAB. It also helps that my partner, who is also my husband, is a technologist. And he worked at ABC News, and that's how we met. We actually met in the commercial industry because he edited my first national commercial, which won a Clio.
Congratulations. See, that long list of awards.
That was so long ago. It was so freaking long ago. So Gals and Gear, we create a venue and a forum for young women to come and learn from mature women, or women who have been in the industry 5 minutes longer than they are. So Amy, it's truly amazing what she does. She finds the students, she partners with a university, and we've worked with, historically Black colleges. We've worked with universities in neighboring states to Las Vegas, where NAB is usually held. This year, we're working with Arizona State University, the Cronkite School of Broadcasting. and she is partnered with Chiron, which is the character generator that everybody knows, but Chiron has developed a technology called Chiron Live, which has a built-in switcher where you can preview 6 channels and more through this one laptop device. So we are doing a staged show, sort of like The View, or it's a video magazine set up in the Chiron booth. And then we'll have a roving camera that's on the floor of NAB, and then we will share control room responsibilities with a team that is at ASU in Phoenix, Arizona. So it's very exciting. There's a lot of new tech coming out in this conversation. Amy has created an offshoot of Gals and Gear called Techwitty Talk, where guests are invited from different broadcast entities, and they're broadcast developers. So they're either doing this year, they're doing new innovations in broadcasting. Last year it was drones and how you incorporate virtual reality into broadcasting. All sorts of subjects, and it's truly amazing, from pre-production all the way to post and everything in between. So you're going out through different mediums, different channels. Some of our sponsors have been with us since 2016, and it's so rewarding that they keep coming back. So this year is truly shocking and amazing, and we're finally hitting our stride. So we have a leadership summit that affords women, young, old, middle profession, to come in and interface with other women who are in the field of technology. And it's a nurturing and positive learning environment. And we are very professional. We stick to a schedule. That's why people keep coming back, is that we know our stuff. So we're not just giving these students an opportunity to use equipment that they would never have an opportunity to use in school, or limited opportunities. We provide them a live environment, a real professional environment that is broadcast out. So it will stream on the Gals and Gear channels through YouTube and Facebook, but it'll also stream on Chiron's channels and all of their socials. And NAB has its own channel, which is called NAB Show Live, and that's switched out of Florida. So it's like the entire country comes together to get this incredible program out. And this year we're doing 3 hours of live broadcasting. So it's impressive. It's truly impressive. And the team that Amy has been able to pull together is across the country, and she's just amazing.
I can tell that you're very passionate about Gals and Gears and the work that you're doing with Amy. So it's wonderful to see how members of Women in Film and Video are working together for the betterment of other women. So thank you for that, Samantha. It's wonderful. So I want to also thank you for being a part of our podcast today. She has a new documentary out that's coming up. It's going to be on PBS, and the name of it again is
Dora Fugh Lee, A Life in Art. And she is one of the last noble women of the Qing dynasty. And when she came to the United States, she saw color. And the show is very touching. It's very emotional. It's moving. And it's beautiful. It just flows so well. I mean, Lenny Williams, who is a composer, he created the music originally. He scored the original composition for the piece, and it just moves. It's so wonderful. And we're airing 3 times on the network and 6 times on the local station. So it's also going to be streamed on PBS's streaming opportunities such as YouTube and Facebook, and they have Passport. So it will stream through PBS Passport as well. So those are wonderful opportunities. And I gave them the rights for 2 years. So you'll see it.
More things to look forward to from Samantha Cheng. Thank you so much for talking to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sandra.
Thank you for listening to Media and Monuments, a service of Women in Film and Video. Please remember to review, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. For more information about WIFV, please visit our website at WIF as in Frank, V as in Victor.org. Media and Monuments is produced by Sandra Abrams, Candace Block, Brandon Ferry, and Tara Jabari, and edited by Emma Klein and Juliana Yellen, with audio production and mix by Steve Lack, Audio. For more information about our podcast, visit mediaandmonuments.com.